Have you ever had someone in your life who didn't just betray you once but made a sport out of it? My sister didn't just hurt me, she made it her personal mission to destroy every single relationship I had, every man I loved, every shred of trust I built. She ripped it apart without a second thought. And not behind closed doors. No. She seduced them, then slept with them in my bed. I'd walk into the room I paid rent for, only to find the man I loved tangled in the sheets with the woman who shared my blood. And when I confronted her shaking with humiliation and rage, she'd just smirk and say, "You should thank me. He wasn't good enough for you." But this story isn't about how she broke me. It's about how I broke the game. This time I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Because I had found someone perfect. Not for me. For her. He looked like everything she ever wanted, rich, charming, drop-dead gorgeous. But beneath that perfect smile, he was a loaded gun, a storm in human form. And I handed him to her on a silver platter. If you think you've heard every revenge story, think again. Because what happened next didn't just ruin her relationships. It ruined her future, her finances, her freedom. Stay with me because by the end of this story, you'll question who really went too far and whether she finally got what she deserved. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Claire Mitchell. I'm 35 years old, a registered nurse living just outside Chicago. For the past decade, I've worked long shifts, cared for patients, and kept to myself. Most people would say I'm the quiet type, reliable, practical, maybe even a little boring. But people don't know what I've been through. And they certainly don't know about Samantha. If you've heard the beginning of my story, the one where my sister seduced every man I ever loved, and then had the audacity to say, "You should thank me. He wasn't good enough for you, then maybe you think you understand." But the truth goes much deeper than one cruel moment or one stolen boyfriend. What she did to me wasn't sudden. It was slow, quiet, corrosive. It began when we were just children living under the same roof, eating the same dinners, but growing up in completely different worlds. From the outside, we looked like your average suburban family. My mother was a high school administrator who rarely took time off work. My father left when we were young, and Samantha and I, just 2 years apart, were close enough in age to be mistaken for twins. But while I was the quiet one with her nose in a book, Samantha sparkled. She had the kind of energy that pulled people in. Adults always said, "What a pretty little girl," or, "She lights up the room." At first I didn't mind. I even felt proud to be her big sister. But as we got older, the differences became harder to ignore. I studied hard, made honor roll, kept my head down. Samantha struggled in school but always seemed to get away with it. She had this way of smiling that made teachers overlook her late homework or forgotten assignments. At home, it was worse. My mother already stressed from work, and Bills would brush me off with a, "Claire doesn't need help, she's my little adult." But with Samantha, she softened. She bought her new dresses for school dances, praised her sense of humor, called her my sunshine girl. I told myself it didn't matter that being the dependable one was a good thing. But every time I watched Samantha get hugged for a B- while I got a nod for an A, a tiny crack formed. There was one moment that sealed everything for me, though I didn't understand it at the time. I must have been 11, Samantha around 9. My mother had been saving money for weeks for some kitchen repairs. She kept the cash in a tin box hidden in the laundry room. One day it was gone. I hadn't touched it, I barely even knew where it was. But when my mother stormed into our room demanding answers, Samantha stood behind her with wide, wet eyes and said nothing. I looked at her, pleading silently. I knew she had taken it. I'd seen her the day before with a new toy, something flashy and expensive looking. But I said nothing. I didn't want to be the reason she got in trouble. Still, my silence wasn't enough. My mother didn't ask questions. She pointed at me and said, "You've always been so quiet lately. What else have you been hiding?" I tried to explain, but she wouldn't hear it. I was grounded for a week, and Samantha never confessed. That day, something shifted. Not just in my mother's eyes, but in mine. I learned that in our family, being responsible meant being invisible. And being invisible meant you were the one they blamed. As we entered high school, I held on to the idea that my time would come, that someone would see me not just as Samantha's older sister, but as a person with her own light. And for a while it seemed like maybe that was true. When I was 16, I started dating Tom, a quiet, thoughtful boy who liked art and long walks, and who actually listened when I spoke. I brought him over for dinner one weekend, hoping my mom would approve. Samantha was 14, then growing into her beauty, all charm and dimples. She barely spoke to us that night, just smiled from across the table and asked Tom vague questions about his favorite movies. A few days later, Tom started acting distant. He canceled plans, stopped calling as much. I assumed it was stress or maybe high school pressure. But one afternoon, I saw his name pop up on Samantha's phone screen. A message. Her face turned guilty just long enough for me to know. I confronted her later and she gave me that same look she gave our mother years before wide eyes, fake innocence. He just needed someone to talk to, she said. You know you can be a little hard to read. A week later, he broke up with me. His reason. Your sister just seems to understand me better. I never told our mother. I didn't scream or cry. I swallowed it. Like always. But that night, lying awake in my room, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the question I'd never dared to before. Was there something wrong with me? Did I deserve to be second place? Looking back now, I know that moment was the beginning of everything. The start of a pattern that would repeat itself again and again, growing more vicious, more humiliating until the day I finally broke it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that day came, I had to lose a few more pieces of myself. And my sister wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. It didn't just happen once. That's the part most people don't understand when they hear my story. It wasn't a single betrayal that broke me, it was the pattern. The slow, steady erosion of my hope every time I thought I'd found something real, only to watch it slip into my sister's hands like it was never mine to begin with. After Tom, I told myself it was a fluke. A mistake. Teenage drama. But by the time I sat in Dr. Evelyn Grant's office years later, staring down at the notepad in my lap, I knew better. The pattern had a name, and it had Samantha's face. You ever think about reaching out to her? Evelyn asked, her voice, gentle, probing. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy remembering Ryan. Ryan was the first man I fell for as an adult. We met at the hospital, both working night shifts in the same wing. He had this dry sense of humor that balanced out my quiet nature, and for once I felt like someone saw me not through Samantha's shadow, but as Claire, the woman who worked hard, cared deeply, and deserved to be chosen. Things moved slowly, naturally. After 6 months, I brought him home to meet my mother. Samantha happened to be there that evening, claiming she needed to pick up some old boxes from the garage. She greeted us with hugs, her smile just a little too wide, her laugh just a little too loud. The next week, she messaged me asking if Ryan could help her with a work project. Just some marketing stuff, she'd said. You know how clueless I am with spreadsheets. I trusted him. I trusted her, though that trust had started to wear thin. But it wasn't long before the distance crept in. Ryan started missing calls, responding to texts hours later. Eventually, the truth came out. Samantha confessed during a heated phone call, her tone almost self-righteous. He made a move, she said. What was I supposed to do, lie to you? I just thought, maybe you'd want to know the truth. He's not who you think. I ended things with Ryan that night, but not before I saw a new photo pop up on Samantha's social feed, her smiling in his hoodie. The caption read, "Honesty is always best." I stared at that picture for hours. Then came David. He and I met during my graduate program. He loved literature, jazz, long philosophical debates. The kind of man who made you feel like every word mattered. For months, I felt like we were building something steady, something safe. But safety never lasted around Samantha. She had tagged along to a dinner party once invited by my well-meaning roommate, and the moment she heard David talking about his favorite author, she lit up like a Christmas tree. "Oh, I love poetry," she told him, even though she never so much as opened a book in her spare time. She asked for reading recommendations. Then book club invites. Then coffee. I should have seen the signs. The slow fade-outs. The missed study sessions. David's sudden shift from deep listener to vague excuses. When I confronted him, he admitted he and Samantha had connected. "It's not about you," he said. "It's just..." She challenges me. I walked out of his apartment without saying another word. The next time I saw them was on campus. They didn't even bother to look embarrassed. And then there was Kyle. Kyle was different. Kyle had been my friend since childhood, someone who knew the real me, awkward stage, messy teenage years, the insecurities I never shared with anyone else. He'd seen it all. Our friendship deepened over the years, and one day it quietly turned into more. There were no fireworks, no grand gestures, just the slow, steady warmth of two people who understood each other. I thought surely this would be safe. Samantha barely knew Kyle. He wasn't flashy, and he'd known me longer than anyone. But even that didn't matter. She came to visit one weekend while Kyle and I were making dinner together. She complimented his cooking, laughed at jokes she didn't understand, asked about our childhood memories. Days later, she texted him asking if he could help her move furniture. A week after that, Kyle told me he was confused. 2 weeks later, he ended things. "Samantha makes me feel alive," he said. "Like I'm not just existing." I didn't cry that time. I didn't scream. I just nodded, walked out, and promised myself I'd never trust another man around her again. Months later, during a bitter argument in our mother's kitchen, after I found out Kyle had moved into Samantha's apartment, I finally snapped. I asked her why she kept doing this, why she couldn't leave a single piece of my life untouched. She didn't deny it. She didn't even flinch. "You should thank me," she said, stirring her tea like we were discussing the weather. "None of those guys deserved you. I just helped you see it faster." I opened my mouth, stunned, but she cut me off. "You fall for anyone who smiles at you. It's pathetic. Someone has to vet them." She said it like it was love, like she was doing me a favor. And when I looked into her eyes, I saw no remorse, only pride. Later, when I tried to talk to my mother, her response was worse. "You know how your sister is," she said. "She gets carried away. But you're the older one, Claire. You're supposed to protect her." I stared at her, baffled. Protect her. From what? From herself. From temptation, she said. "You bring these men into our home. What did you expect?" In that moment, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Not sadness, not shame, but clarity. A sharp, searing realization that I was on my own. That no one, not my mother, not the men I loved, and certainly not Samantha, was going to protect me. And for the first time, the idea crossed my mind like a shadow creeping along the wall. What if I stopped playing the good sister? What if just once I let her fall? I thought I had finally outgrown the pain. After Ryan, David, and all the quiet betrayals that came before them, I had promised myself I'd never fall for the same trap again. And for a while I didn't. I kept my heart close guarded. I focused on work, on stability, on building something for myself that had nothing to do with love. Then came Kyle. Kyle had always been in my life like a steady beam of light I never thought would flicker. We grew up on the same block, shared the same sandbox, went to the same schools. He was the one who helped me study for biology finals, the one who drove across town with soup when I had the flu, the one who saw me without makeup or pretenses and stayed anyway. We were best friends before we were anything more. The shift was quiet. We started spending more weekends together. Long talks turned into lingering glances. One night, after helping me assemble a bookshelf in my apartment, he kissed me. It wasn't fireworks, it was something better. Safe, familiar, real. Kyle was the first man I truly trusted. He knew what Samantha had done to me, all of it. I had told him everything, even the things I hadn't told Evelyn. He listened, never flinching. He made me feel like I wasn't broken, like I could still be loved, not in spite of my past, but because of it. After 2 years together, we started talking seriously about the future. Marriage, a home, children. I let myself believe. For the first time since I was a teenager, I let myself hope. Then came my mother's birthday dinner. She wanted something special for her 60th. Nothing fancy, just a quiet evening with close family at a local Italian restaurant. I agreed to come even though it meant seeing Samantha. We hadn't spoken much since the last fallout, but I told myself I could be civil. It was just dinner. Kyle came with me, of course. He brought flowers for my mother, wore that soft blue shirt I loved, and held my hand under the table as we ordered. For a while it was almost perfect. We laughed. We shared memories. Even Samantha seemed restrained, sipping wine and offering polite conversation. But by the second glass, the restraint began to crack. She leaned too close when talking to Kyle, brushing his arm as she reached for the bread. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, even the ones only I would normally get. At first, I tried to ignore it. This was Samantha's way, testing boundaries, seeking attention. I had learned to expect it. What I didn't expect was what came next. The waiter brought out a small birthday cake. My mother beamed. We all sang, even Samantha, slightly off-key. Then, as the candles flickered and my mother made a wish, I turned to see Samantha standing behind Kyle's chair. And then she kissed him. Not a peck on the cheek, not a sisterly joke, a full, lingering kiss on the mouth. Right there in front of our mother, our cousins, the waiter. The entire table froze. Kyle didn't pull away immediately. His hands twitched on the tablecloth. His eyes stayed shut for half a second too long. When I stood up, the chair screeched. No one said a word. Samantha laughed. "Relax," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's just a joke. You guys are so uptight." I left before dessert. I didn't answer Kyle's calls that night. Or the next. 3 days later, he showed up at my door. He looked like he hadn't slept. His words were slow, deliberate. He swore nothing had happened until that kiss. That it caught him off guard. That he was drunk. That it didn't mean anything. Then he told me the truth. Samantha had been texting him. For weeks. Little things. Questions. Compliments. "You're so good to Claire. I wish I had someone like you. You always know the right thing to say." At first he didn't think anything of it, but she made him feel his words seen. He told me he loved me, but with Samantha he felt alive. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I told him to leave. And this time I meant it. A few days later, Samantha posted a picture. Her and Kyle holding hands at the farmer's market. The caption read, "Don't let judgment keep you from your truth. #TrueLove." There were comments. So many comments. "Wait, wasn't he with your sister?" Wow. Bold. Some defended her. Most didn't. But what struck me most wasn't the betrayal. It was the smile on her face. The triumph. The quiet smugness that said, "I win again." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about Kyle. It was a game. A test. A way to remind me that no matter how far I thought I'd come, she could still take everything if she wanted to. I wasn't just collateral damage. I was the target. And I realized for the first time that she wasn't going to stop until I was nothing. But this time, I wouldn't be the one who disappeared. Not again. Not anymore. She didn't pack much when she left. A few changes of clothes, some worn-out books, and a box of kitchen essentials she never used. Claire wasn't running away, not exactly. It was more like she was letting go, releasing herself from the wreckage that had piled up year after year. Chicago had always seemed too loud, too close, too full of ghosts. So she found a small apartment in a quiet suburb just far enough to breathe, but not so far that she felt erased. Her new place was modest, 2 rooms, creaky floors, a tiny balcony that overlooked a parking lot. But it was hers. No shared family dinners. No footsteps outside her bedroom. No glances exchanged across the table wondering which man would disappear next. Just silence. And for the first time, Claire realized how much she'd craved it. She threw herself into her work. Nursing wasn't glamorous, but it gave her something she desperately needed: purpose. She worked long shifts at the hospital, rotating through the ER, geriatrics, even the pediatric wing. She cleaned wounds, held trembling hands, whispered comfort to strangers in their most fragile moments. It was messy, exhausting, and often thankless, but it grounded her. In saving others, she began to feel the first threads of herself stitching back together. She cut off contact with her family. It wasn't out of hatred, it was survival. She blocked her mother's number, muted Samantha on every platform, and deleted every shared photo on her phone. Sometimes late at night, she'd listen to voicemails without pressing play, just staring at the notification, her thumb hovering over the delete button. And once or twice, she gave in. Listened. Her mother's voice sounded smaller than she remembered. There was one message that lingered. "Your sister misses you, Claire. I know she doesn't say it, but she does. Family's complicated, but we only get one." Claire deleted it, but not before the words carved a small dent in her chest. She thought of Samantha as a child clutching a blanket trailing behind her on Christmas morning. There had been laughter once. There had been closeness, but it felt like another life now. After 6 months, a colleague at the hospital gently suggested therapy. "You hold yourself so tightly," she said one afternoon in the break room. "It's like you're waiting for the next blow." Claire resisted at first. She didn't believe in digging up the past just to bleed all over it again. But eventually, exhaustion won out. She made an appointment with Dr. Evelyn Grant, a trauma therapist with kind eyes and a voice like warm tea. Their first sessions were stiff. Claire spoke in clinical terms like she was describing someone else's life. Childhood wounds, repeated betrayals, a family that had stopped feeling like home. But Evelyn was patient. She asked questions that didn't press, but lingered. One in particular stuck. "If your sister fell," Evelyn said during their 4th session, "would you reach for her hand? Or would you watch her fall?" Claire didn't answer, not with words. But her eyes, hard and quiet, said everything. She was tired. Tired of being the net, the fixer, the one who stayed soft no matter how many cuts she took. Maybe this time Samantha would have to hit the ground on her own. A few weeks later, she received an invitation to a wedding. An old college friend was getting married in downtown Chicago and had insisted Claire come. At first, she tossed it in the trash, but then she reconsidered. Maybe it was time. Time to see who she was when she wasn't hiding. She bought a new dress, simple navy blue, something that made her feel like herself again. The reception was held in a glassy rooftop venue overlooking the skyline. Music played, laughter echoed, and somewhere between the appetizers and the cake, she met Nathan Brooks. He wasn't her type, at least not the type she thought she had. Tall, sharp-jawed, dressed in a tailored suit with a quiet confidence that bordered on arrogance. He approached her during a slow song, asked if she wanted to step outside. The air on the balcony was cool, the city lights winking below. They talked. About work, he said he was in finance. About travel, he'd just come back from a ski trip in Aspen. About family, he was vague, evasive, but charming enough to make her overlook it. There was something off about him. Claire couldn't put her finger on it. Maybe it was the way he seemed too polished, too curated. Or the fact that he asked more questions than he answered. But still there was something magnetic about him. Something familiar in a strange way. She caught herself thinking Samantha would fall for this guy in a heartbeat. And that thought stuck with her long after the wedding lights dimmed. Long after Nathan asked for her number. Long after she gave it. Something had shifted. Something important. Claire didn't know it yet, not fully. But the storm hadn't passed. It had just changed direction. Nathan Brooks was the kind of man who knew how to take up space without making it obvious. In the weeks following the wedding, Claire met him for coffee, then for dinner, then for wine on a quiet Thursday evening that stretched longer than she expected. He was charming but not aggressive, funny without being rehearsed, and always just distant enough to remain interesting. Most women might have called it refreshing. Claire called it a red flag. She'd learned the hard way that people who seemed too good to be true usually were. There were little things. He never talked about his family, brushing off the topic with vague mentions of a distant sister who lived abroad. He changed the subject smoothly whenever she asked what exactly his job entailed, even though his suits and his talk of quarterly earnings suggested he worked somewhere high in finance. Once, when she playfully asked what his middle name was, he gave her a grin and said, "I'll tell you when you've earned it." It wasn't charming. It was evasive. Still, she kept seeing him. Not because she was smitten. Not because she wanted romance. Because something deep inside her, something sharper than curiosity, had begun to stir. It wasn't revenge yet. Not fully. But it was the beginning. On a rainy Saturday, Claire opened her laptop and searched for Nathan Brooks. At first, all she found were the polished things: his well-manicured LinkedIn profile, a few quotes in obscure financial blogs, and photos from networking events that looked staged. Then she looked deeper. She sifted through online court dockets, diving into public records from 3 different states. In Missouri, a civil case dismissed without prejudice. In Colorado, an ex-girlfriend who filed for a restraining order then later withdrew it. On a small blog hosted by a woman named Lucy Lighthouse, Claire found a thread about emotional con artists. One post stood out. He called himself Nathan B., said he was divorced, said he loved me, then drained my savings and vanished. Claire read every word. The woman described a man who fit Nathan's description perfectly. Slick, attentive, generous at first, but always angling toward control. Gifts followed by guilt. Promises followed by pressure. He'd left with $10,000 and a trail of unfulfilled dreams. Claire created an anonymous email and reached out. She didn't expect a reply, but she got one. The woman's message was brief. "I tried to warn others. No one believed me. Be careful." Claire sat with that warning for a long time. She could have walked away, blocked Nathan's number, told the police maybe, but that would have ended the story too soon. Samantha wouldn't learn anything from that. Not the kind of lesson Claire had learned over and over again while her sister took what wasn't hers. What if Samantha fell for him? The thought came gently at first. Then it rooted itself like a seed finding soil. Nathan was everything Samantha had ever chased. Suave, attractive, a man who seemed powerful but wounded, like someone only she could fix. He was the kind of man who turned seduction into performance. And Samantha. She'd always been desperate for the lead role. Claire started leaning into the idea. She kept seeing Nathan twice a week, sometimes more. She let him think she was drawn in, smiled when he talked about his latest trip to New York, asked soft questions, and made no judgments when his answers were shallow or incomplete. She played the role Samantha had always played, the sweet, open woman who wanted to believe the best in a man. But she never let herself go soft. She was watching, calculating. The trap had to look like a gift. When her mother called out of the blue in late spring, Claire let it ring twice before answering. The voice on the other end sounded tired, weathered. "Claire," her mother said, "I know you don't want to hear from me, but we're having a family dinner for my birthday next month. I'd really like you to come." Claire paused, then agreed. She told Nathan about the dinner over lunch one day. "My family's complicated," she said, twisting her napkin slowly. "Especially my sister. I just want to get through it without any drama." Nathan smiled, that practiced, easy smile she'd seen him give waiters and strangers alike. "I'm good with families," he said. "People tend to like me." That wasn't a brag. It was a warning. Claire made sure he came. She picked out a dress that said effortless but respectable and brought a bottle of wine. Nathan arrived separately in his BMW and gave her mother a bouquet of lilies. He greeted everyone with warmth and a handshake, but when it came to Samantha, he barely looked at her. Claire noticed the twitch in Samantha's smile, the way her voice got a little higher when she spoke to him, how she reached for a glass of wine quicker than usual. During dinner, Nathan complimented Claire's choice of entree. He laughed at her father's terrible jokes. He asked her mother questions about her garden, but when Samantha tried to join the conversation, he turned just slightly away. Not enough to be rude, just enough to spark the ache of being ignored. Samantha wasn't used to that. After dessert, Claire excused herself to take a call that didn't exist. She lingered in the hallway by the bathroom close enough to hear murmurs float in from the kitchen. Samantha's voice was low, flirtatious. Claire didn't catch every word, but the tone was unmistakable. Claire returned to the table 10 minutes later. Nathan and Samantha were chatting like old friends. The spark had caught. And Claire. She poured herself another glass of wine and smiled. Quietly. Patiently. The game had begun. The birthday party was held at a modest but upscale restaurant just outside Evanston, one of those places with white tablecloths, floral centerpieces, and piano music humming faintly in the background. It had been nearly 6 months since Claire had seen her family. 6 long months since the explosion with Kyle, since she'd walked away without a second glance. When her mother called and pleaded, "Just for my birthday. Please." Claire had hesitated. But deep down she knew she needed this night to happen. Not for reconciliation. For execution. She walked in wearing a navy blue dress, classic, understated just enough to look composed without being flashy. Nathan followed behind her, a bouquet of tulips in one hand and a bottle of Pinot Noir in the other. He was charming, as always, smiling broadly, offering a warm, happy birthday. Mrs. Whitmore, and handing the gifts to Claire's mother like a seasoned diplomat. He pulled out chairs for both Claire and her mother, made small talk with her father about market trends, and even complimented the choice of venue. But when Samantha entered the room 20 minutes late, all eyes turned to her. She was radiant in red hair curled perfectly, lipstick sharp as a knife. Claire watched her sister scan the table, eyes quickly locking on Nathan. Her gaze lingered, curious, calculating, and then she smiled. Nathan, by contrast, barely acknowledged her. He stood politely, nodded once, and returned to his conversation with Claire's father without missing a beat. If Samantha expected the usual lingering handshake or admiring glance, she was sorely disappointed. Claire saw it instantly. The twitch in her sister's brow. The half-second delay before she sat down as if recalibrating. Nathan spent the next hour doing exactly what Claire hoped he would, lavishing her with just enough attention to keep Samantha on edge, but never tipping too far into obvious performance. He laughed at Claire's jokes, reached for her hand across the table once, and complimented her taste in wine. To an outsider, he looked like a man enamored with his girlfriend. To Samantha, he looked like a challenge. By the time appetizers were cleared, Samantha had already begun testing the waters. She leaned over slightly to ask Nathan a question about his job, something vague about investments. He answered politely, then redirected the conversation toward Claire's nursing work, saying, "I don't know how she does what she does. The way she handles people in crisis, it's incredible." Samantha let out a light, practiced laugh. Claire always did like saving people. She said, a trace of something sharp behind her words. Claire smiled, but said nothing. When dessert arrived, a chocolate ganache cake with raspberry coulis, Nathan stood to propose a toast. To Mrs. Whitmore, he said, raising his glass. "For raising a remarkable daughter." There was a beat of awkward silence. Claire's mother looked touched. Samantha looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. It was time. Claire excused herself, murmuring something about needing to call the hospital and check on a patient. She left her phone on the table deliberately and walked toward the restrooms, where she paused by a decorative divider just beyond the dining area. From this vantage point she couldn't see them, but she could hear. She waited. 5 minutes. Then 7. Voices drifted faintly. "I'm surprised Claire didn't tell me about you sooner," Samantha said. Her tone was light, but Claire recognized it. That sugary sweetness she always layered over her provocations. Nathan responded, a low murmur, something Claire couldn't quite catch. There was a pause. Then Samantha's voice, softer now. "You know Claire's sweet and all. But she's a little vanilla, isn't she?" Claire's stomach turned, but she didn't move. "I could show you things she wouldn't even dare to try," Samantha continued. "You ever wonder what it's like to be with someone who's not afraid to take the lead?" Claire felt her breath catch, but it wasn't surprise. It was confirmation. This wasn't about attraction. It never had been. This was conquest. She waited a moment longer, then calmly walked back to the table. Nathan and Samantha were seated normally, both looking up as if nothing had happened. Her mother was slicing the cake, oblivious. Her father was still nursing his whiskey. Claire sat down. Nathan leaned in slightly. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," Claire said, reaching for her wine. "Just a little check-in." She watched Samantha closely now. Her sister's eyes sparkled with that dangerous mix of curiosity and ambition. Claire had seen it before when Samantha spotted a new car she wanted, or a promotion she thought she deserved more than her coworker. But this time it was more than desire. It was hunger. Claire turned her gaze toward the candlelight flickering across the tablecloth. She could hear Evelyn's voice in her head from their last session. "If your sister were drowning, would you throw her a rope or watch her sink?" Claire had paused then, unsure. But now she was certain. This wasn't about drowning. It was about swimming straight into a whirlpool and pretending you could outpace it. Let her swim. Let her chase. Because the man Samantha was about to seduce wasn't just another boyfriend to steal. He was the beginning of her undoing. Samantha didn't waste time. Within a week of the birthday dinner, Nathan started appearing in her Instagram stories, first in subtle glimpses. A blurred shoulder here, the sound of his voice in the background there. Then came a photo of 2 wine glasses on a rooftop at dusk. The caption read, "Some people just get you. No tags, no faces." But Claire didn't need confirmation. She had already handed Samantha the match and was now quietly watching the fuse burn. 2 months later, they were officially a couple, and Samantha had moved into Nathan's condo in Cherry Creek. It was fast, too fast, but Samantha had always equated urgency with passion. She saw no red flags, only fireworks. Claire watched from a distance, never reaching out, never commenting, never breaking her silence. Her part in the story had shifted. She wasn't the abandoned sister anymore. She was the audience now. And the show was just getting started. It was during the 3rd month of their whirlwind romance that Nathan made his move. Over brunch in a sunlit cafe with floor-to-ceiling windows, he pitched the idea like it was a wedding proposal. "There's this startup I'm backing," he told Samantha, running a hand through his hair. "Ground floor opportunity. It's niche, but the returns are aggressive. I'd love for us to get in on it together." Samantha, already floating in the high of designer handbags and weekend getaways, said yes without hesitation. She pulled $30,000 from her savings, then borrowed another $20,000 from their mother, spinning it as a joint investment in their shared future. "Nathan knows what he's doing," she told her mom confidently. "He has connections. He's done this before." And Claire's mother, always eager to believe in love, wrote the check. Meanwhile, Claire wasn't just watching, she was working. She had used part of her savings, carefully tucked away from years of frugal living and night shifts, to hire someone she only knew as Avery Hex. They'd met through a private cybersecurity forum referred to her by an old friend from nursing school who had pivoted into IT. Avery didn't ask many questions, just credentials, payment, and one request. Discretion goes both ways. Through encrypted back channels, Claire gave Avery access to Samantha's shared computer at the condo, email forwarding rules, and Nathan's business website. Within a week, Avery began sending updates in cold clinical language. Attached bank transfers showing funneling from Samantha Whitmore's account to offshore entity registered in Belize. Attached PDF of power of attorney form Nathan Brooks had Samantha sign. She believed it was for investment authorization. Attached email between Nathan and unknown third-party referencing, target fully exposed. Claire opened each document slowly, deliberately, letting the betrayal soak in like a balm. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was revelation. She had always known her sister played with hearts, but this time Samantha had wagered something real, and she was losing. In therapy, Evelyn noticed the change in Claire's posture. Less tension, fewer pauses. A strange stillness. "How are you feeling about things now?" she asked gently, watching her over rimless glasses. Claire considered the question for a moment, then said, "I used to think I wanted her to suffer. And now I don't need her to suffer. I just want her to see what it feels like." Evelyn nodded slowly. "And if everything falls apart, if she loses it all, will you feel satisfied? Or guilty?" Claire didn't answer right away. She looked out the office window where the leaves were starting to fall dry and golden against the glass. Then she turned back and said calmly, "I'll feel at peace." Because this time, she walked into it. Eyes open, heart full, wallet wide. There was no glee in her tone, no triumph, only quiet conviction. Avery's next report confirmed what Claire already suspected. Nathan was slowly transferring ownership of their shared condo into a shell corporation he controlled. Samantha had signed the transfer papers, assuming they were part of a refinancing agreement. Nathan had told her it was to protect us from tax liability. Claire saved the screenshots. She backed them up twice. She didn't intend to stop him yet. Because Samantha still believed she was winning. She still posted Instagram reels from the condo balcony barefoot in satin robes, sipping mimosas, writing captions like, "Some dreams write themselves." She still told their mother that Nathan was different, that this one was real. She still believed that the game was hers to play. But Claire knew better. She had seen this story too many times. The flirtation, the seduction, the blind trust. Only now the stakes were real. The money was real. The man was real, at least in his cruelty, if not his identity. Claire wasn't smiling, but she wasn't blinking either. Samantha had always lived in the moment. She believed in instinct and chemistry, in the thrill of taking what she wanted before the world could say no. But even she couldn't ignore the signs when they started piling up. A transaction on her credit card she didn't recognize. A bank statement that didn't quite match her records. A moment when Nathan slammed his laptop shut a little too fast when she walked in. She'd never been the suspicious type. Not really. But Samantha had taken 2 semesters of financial literacy during college, mostly to please a boyfriend who worked in accounting. At the time, she thought it was boring. Now she realized it might be the only thing standing between her and something much worse. One evening while Nathan was in the shower, she tiptoed to his laptop. She hesitated, her reflection flickering in the black screen. Then she opened it and began clicking. What she saw made her stomach tighten. Offshore accounts, unfamiliar company names, documents with her signature on them, ones she didn't remember signing. She didn't scream, didn't confront him. Instead, she quietly backed away. The next morning after Nathan left for work, she made a call to a private investigator she found online. The consultation was brief and expensive, but she wired the retainer fee without blinking. "I need you to access his files," she said. "I think he's stealing from me, and I think he's planning something worse." The investigator promised discretion. "Do not change your behavior," he warned. "Don't let him suspect you know anything." Samantha nodded and hung up. For the first time in her life, she wasn't playing a game. She was surviving one. What she didn't know was that Claire had eyes on her too. Avery the hacker, Claire had hired months earlier, wasn't just tracking Nathan anymore. He had started monitoring Samantha as well. Claire had given him permission, unsure at first, but something in her gut had told her that this story had more layers. When Avery forwarded the summary report that Samantha had hired a PI and was digging into Nathan's laptop, Claire felt a chill. She hadn't expected this. She thought Samantha would walk blindly into destruction like always. But this was new. Samantha was fighting back. Claire sat in her apartment that night, lights dimmed, phone face down on the table. For the first time, she questioned the edges of her plan. What if Samantha actually got out of it? What if she exposed Nathan before the damage was done? Worse. What if she turned it into another victory? Another twisted tale where Claire was the fool and Samantha the survivor. Claire couldn't let that happen. So she adapted. She created a new Gmail account, masked through a VPN with a generic profile and signature. Then, posing as Nathan, she drafted an email. Subject: Secure Exit Plan. Body: You're right to question everything. I've been compromised. If you want to cut ties clean, I need you to sign these and send them back to my attorney. He'll handle the rest. No police, no drama, just quiet resolution. Attached were fabricated documents carefully designed to look legal but subtly incriminating. Claire sent the email, then waited. Hours passed. Then a reply from Samantha's account. Understood. Will review and send by morning. Claire exhaled barely. She didn't stop there. She used the same account to message Samantha again this time, posing as the attorney offering to help Samantha file a private lawsuit to recover her assets on one condition: no authorities involved. That will only complicate things for you. Samantha believed it. She had no reason not to. She forwarded the documents to her investigator and told her mother over the phone that she was handling it, that she had it under control, that Nathan messed with the wrong woman. Claire, listening to a playback of the call through Avery's encrypted stream, almost smiled. Not because it was working, but because it had never worked before. This wasn't revenge through brute force. It was strategy. She wasn't the sister begging for answers anymore. She was the architect drawing the walls tighter with every move Samantha made. And Samantha. She was playing right into it, still thinking she held the upper hand, still thinking she was outsmarting a man. She never once imagined the person pulling the strings was the woman she had betrayed over and over again. Her own sister. Watching, waiting one step ahead. Claire watched it all unfold from behind a screen. There was no sense of triumph, no moment of satisfaction. Only silence. Cold, clinical silence as she received the last batch of surveillance files from Avery, the hacker she had trusted with everything. He had caught it all. Nathan's voice rising Samantha's tears, the bruises that bloomed like cruel secrets across her arms. The camera inside Nathan's apartment was hidden behind a bookshelf aimed toward the hallway. It didn't catch everything, but it caught enough. Samantha had tried to confront Nathan. She had found too many discrepancies to ignore wire transfers, falsified investment paperwork, her name attached to companies she'd never heard of. She demanded answers. She screamed. She threatened to go to the police. And that's when Nathan showed her who he really was. He didn't shout. He didn't hit her in a frenzy. He closed the distance between them slowly, like a lion walking toward a wounded gazelle. He grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to send a message. He shoved her back against the kitchen counter and told her she wasn't going anywhere until she signed a new set of papers. Papers he claimed would clear up the confusion. Samantha signed them. Not because she believed him, but because she was scared. He locked the door behind her after that. Took her phone. Told her not to cry because crying made him angry. Then he left the apartment for an appointment, leaving her there with a glass of wine and a broken sense of reality. Claire didn't call the police. She didn't drive over to rescue her sister. She opened a private window on her laptop, logged into the anonymous tip portal on the FBI's Financial Crimes Division website, and uploaded every file Avery had given her: emails, transaction logs, screen recordings, video clips, PDFs of falsified forms, and Samantha's digital signature on at least 4 fraudulent investment contracts. She didn't include her name. She didn't need to. The files spoke loudly enough on their own. The next 10 days passed in a haze. Claire returned to work. She attended her therapy sessions with Dr. Grant. She went grocery shopping. But her thoughts remained fixed on that apartment and what might be happening behind its walls. Then, early on a Tuesday morning, she got the message from Avery. They're in. It had taken the FBI less than 2 weeks to verify enough of the material to obtain a warrant. Claire sat motionless in her apartment, staring at the silent footage, armored agents storming Nathan's condo, shouting commands, guns drawn. Samantha was found sitting on the edge of the couch, barefoot and dazed still in the clothes she'd worn the day before. Nathan was nowhere to be found. He'd left 20 minutes earlier, according to building security footage. He was gone. But he'd left behind a mess so tangled it wrapped Samantha in it like barbed wire. The agents found a folder on the desk titled Investor Relations with Samantha's name listed as co-signer. Her signature was real. The funds attached to her personal accounts were real. Her voice appeared on voicemails with supposed clients that were now linked to fraudulent shell companies. Whether she knew what she was doing or not no longer mattered. Intent could be debated. Participation could not. The charge: conspiracy to commit securities fraud and financial misrepresentation. Claire learned all of this from the local news like everyone else. She didn't have to dig for it. Samantha's mugshot appeared on the evening broadcast, tired, pale, with smeared eyeliner and hollow eyes. The news anchor used the phrase willing participant and reckless negligence. The internet lit up with speculation. Claire sat on her couch, wine glass in hand, not knowing whether to cry or exhale. Her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. Voicemail. She played it once, then twice. It was Samantha's voice, broken and trembling. "Claire, please. I don't know what happened. I didn't know any of this. He locked me in. He used me. I swear I didn't know. They're saying I could go to prison. Please. I don't have anyone else. You're all I have." Claire stared at the floor long after the voicemail ended. She didn't delete it right away. But she didn't respond either. Instead, she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and stared at the blank TV screen, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. Justice had arrived, not in the form of vengeance or shouting matches, but in the slow, grinding wheels of a system Samantha had never believed would touch her. Now it had, and it wouldn't let go. The news kept playing the same clip, over and over. Samantha in handcuffs, her once glossy hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, her face pale and drawn. The camera caught her eyes darting between the officers, her lips trembling but silent. A banner scrolled beneath her image. Local woman linked to multi-million-dollar investment fraud. Faces multiple charges. Claire didn't need to watch it again. But she did. 3 times. The voicemail had come in 2 hours earlier. A different voice, this time flat official, announcing the message was from the county detention center. Then Samantha's voice, tired and raw. "Claire, it's me. Please don't hang up. I didn't know what I was signing. I didn't know who he really was. He locked me in, Claire, I swear. You're my sister. I don't have anyone else. Please. I need you." Claire had listened all the way through. No interruptions, no fast-forwarding. Just silence at the end as she stared at the phone, her thumb hovering over the delete button. She didn't press it right away. A strange ache settled in her chest. Not sympathy, something colder. The ache of an old scar that had never quite healed, now exposed to fresh air. Then she hit delete. By that evening, the story was all over the local news stations. Her face, her name, the mugshot, the charges. Interviews with former investors who'd realized they'd lost their retirement savings. A financial analyst explaining how easily people like Samantha were manipulated into becoming accomplices. One segment included quotes from anonymous sources, likely friends who had once attended Samantha's birthday parties or commented fire emojis under her selfies. Now they were sharing screenshots, rumors, guesses. She always thought she was too smart to get caught. "I heard she got everything she deserved." Claire read the comments quietly, word by word. She didn't share them. She didn't reply. Her mother called later that night. Claire saw the name flash on her screen and almost let it go to voicemail, but something, curiosity maybe, made her swipe to answer. "Claire." Her mother's voice was brittle, worn down. "You saw the news I did." There was a pause. Just enough space for 1,000 things to pass unsaid. "Did you know?" her mother finally asked. "Did you know who he was? That he'd do this to her?" Claire didn't lie. She didn't soften her tone. "I knew exactly who he was. I just introduced her to the type of man she's always gone after." Her mother exhaled, sharp and trembling. "My God." Another silence. Claire waited for the defense. The usual justification. That Samantha was confused. That she'd always had a good heart. That she didn't deserve this. But none came. Instead, her mother's voice cracked. "I thought I was protecting her. I thought if I just loved her enough, maybe she'd be okay. I didn't realize how much I was losing you in the process." Claire said nothing. "I'm sorry," her mother whispered. "For not seeing what she was doing to you. For expecting you to carry the weight alone. Sorry." Claire had waited years to hear that word. But now that it came, it didn't feel like a reward. It felt like rubble after a building had already collapsed. She'll probably lose everything her mother added. Her job, her credit, maybe her future. She already did, Claire said quietly. The day she decided breaking me was more important than loving me. That night, Claire sat on her balcony with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The wind from Lake Michigan blew cold against her cheeks. She thought about Samantha's voicemail, the plea, the desperation, and then the years of smirks of kisses stolen in bedrooms that weren't hers of men who left without even a second glance. Maybe it had never really been about revenge. Maybe it had been about restoring balance. Samantha had finally felt what it meant to be powerless, to trust someone who only saw her as leverage, to reach for help and find only silence on the other end. Just like Claire had. Time and time again. Now perhaps they were even. Or maybe not. Because the scars Samantha carried would be visible court records, ruined credit, a mugshot that would never disappear from search engines. Claire's scars lived deeper, buried beneath layers of restraint and composure. But at least now someone else finally understood how it felt to fall apart behind a smile. Claire was sipping her morning coffee on a quiet Sunday when the notification came in. A new email. No subject. No sender. The message opened with a single line. Thanks for the introduction to your sister. She was fun while she lasted, but you didn't think the game was really over, did you? Beneath that was an attachment, a screenshot of her bank account. Or rather, what used to be her bank account. Her $10,000 emergency fund, painstakingly built over the last 3 years from overtime shifts and holiday hours at the hospital, was gone. Claire froze. Her heart pounded as she logged into her online banking directly. Zero balance, a handful of transactions to obscure payment processors, none of it traceable to anyone directly. But the dates lined up with the week Samantha had been arrested. Nathan had acted fast. There was another line at the bottom of the email written in the same cruel calm as before. Don't worry. I left you enough to feel safe, but not enough to feel secure. Think of it as your own lesson in trust. Claire reported the theft, filed a complaint, spoke with a detective who offered her sympathy but not much hope. The system needed more than a vague email and missing money to move. There were no login anomalies, no IP addresses from overseas. Nathan had covered his tracks. She sat alone that evening staring at her ceiling. $10,000. Gone. Just like that. She wasn't above being hurt after all. For a moment, it felt like the balance she'd restored with Samantha had shifted again, this time, not in Claire's favor, but no one's. 10 months later, a news article popped up in her feed. Former fraud suspect starts over in Oregon, pens memoir about survival. Claire clicked. The photo was grainy, but unmistakably Samantha. Her hair shorter now, face softer. A small smile, tight and cautious. She stood in front of a tiny, independent coffee shop called New Dawn Cafe in Portland. The article explained that Samantha had taken a plea deal, served 10 months in minimum security, and was now working as a barista while writing a memoir titled How I Survived Loving the Wrong Man. The tone was sanitized, sympathetic. The narrative painted her as someone naive swept up in a dangerous relationship, now rebuilding her life and inspiring others. The journalist quoted passages from her upcoming book, including one where Samantha hinted at someone close to me who may have known more than they let on. Claire read it twice. She recognized the dig. The suspicion. Samantha didn't have proof, but she had intuition. And her pen. The final quote in the article landed with a thud. Sometimes the worst betrayal isn't from a lover. It's from someone who called themselves family. Claire stared at the screen. Part of her wanted to laugh. Part of her wanted to cry. Instead, she just closed the laptop. The truth was, she hadn't won. Not really. She'd stopped Samantha, yes. She'd seen justice in some form. But Nathan had slipped through her fingers, taking a piece of her with him. And Samantha had turned the ashes of her life into a story. one that would paint her as the tragic heroine, one that left Claire as a nameless shadow in the background. There were no medals for revenge, no trophies, only scars and ghosts. Claire returned to work that week quieter, less certain, more aware of how easily the scales could tip again. She'd survived, but she wasn't untouched. No one had walked away clean, and the game, it seemed, had never really ended. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Claire wandered into the little bookstore near the hospital. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a place to breathe, to be alone. The smell of old pages and fresh coffee felt strangely grounding. She moved through the aisles slowly, half scanning covers, half lost in thought, until one particular display caught her eye. There it was. How I Survived Loving the Wrong Man by Samantha Reed, her sister's name in bold serif font across a soft pastel cover, a silhouette of a woman standing against a city skyline, chin lifted toward the light. It looked so polished, so carefully designed to erase the mess beneath it. Claire hesitated, then picked it up. The first pages were filled with acknowledgments to those who stood by me even when I didn't deserve it. Then came the story, a version of it anyway. Sanitized, dramatic, shaped for sympathy. There were no names, no direct accusations. But between the lines, Claire could feel herself. She flipped to the final page. The last sentence read, "And to the one who let me fall, thank you. Without that fall, I would have never learned how to stand." Claire stared at those words for a long time. Her lips pressed into something that wasn't quite a smile, not bitterness either, just recognition. She returned the book to the shelf and walked out without buying it. That evening, she sat across from Dr. Evelyn Grant for what would be their last scheduled session. Claire looked different now, stronger but softer. A woman who had walked through a storm and come out not cleaner but clearer. "I don't feel happy," she said simply. "Not triumphant. But I sleep. I wake up. I go to work. I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore." Evelyn nodded. "That's what healing looks like. Not celebration. Just peace." Claire was quiet for a while, then added, "I didn't save her, did I?" "No," Evelyn answered. "But you saved yourself. And maybe in some twisted way she started saving herself too." Claire didn't reply. She just nodded slowly, like someone finally accepting that some questions don't have clean answers. A few months later, she met someone new. His name was Daniel. He wasn't flashy or charming in a dangerous way. He laughed at her dry jokes. He cooked dinner without being asked. And when Claire told him she wasn't ready to talk about her family, he just nodded, held her hand, and said, "Whenever you are." She didn't know if it would last. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she was waiting for something to go wrong. Still, sometimes at night, she would run her fingers absent-mindedly over her wrist, like checking for wounds long since closed. The scars were still there, faint but present, and maybe they always would be. But not all scars meant broken. Some were just proof that she had survived. So what do you think? Was Claire justified in what she did? Was this justice, or just cruelty wrapped in a prettier dress? Some might say Samantha got exactly what she deserved. Others might argue no one really wins when revenge becomes the goal. But maybe, just maybe, this story isn't about winning at all. Maybe it's about survival, about setting boundaries, about finally saying no more. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you angry, made you think, made you feel, don't just scroll away. Tell me. What would you have done if you were Claire? Would you have walked away? Would you have warned your sister, or watched her fall? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and if you want more stories like this, raw, real, twisted, and unforgettable, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. There's more coming. Because sometimes the darkest family secrets make the most unforgettable stories.